This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial, and if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant. But before we begin in earnest, a message from our Department of Crass Commerce. Claudia and I are delighted to announce that our 2024 Streets of New York Photography workshop schedule is now online, and our workshops have continued to grow. In addition to our original Streets of New York workshops we've been doing since 2019, and our Streets of London and Streets of Tokyo workshops added in 2023, for 2024, we've added Paris and Berlin, all cities Claudia and I have visited and loved. In each of these 4-day workshops, experiences really, our ambition is to help you. You will grow your street photography skills in some of the most iconic settings for this genre anywhere in the world, and have a blast doing it. We'll delve into the history of street photography, go broad and deep on gear choices and techniques, teach you how to expose and compose effectively, go through multiple rounds of constructive critique in a uniquely supportive way, perhaps even challenge you on the meaning of your work, and help you refine or develop your unique photographic voice. But most importantly, we'll get you out onto some of the world's greatest streets with like-minded photographers. So space is limited. And even though it's only November, classes are already filling. So if you're interested, please hop over to www.3bmep.com/streets24 to learn more. Anyway, right. the 90V. It is only the third lens in Hasselblad's new V lineup, and like the others, the 38 and 55 f2s, call them full-frame equivalent field of view and shallowest depth of field of 30 and 45 millimeter f2s, it shares not only that maximum aperture, but their handling, aesthetically and tactilely pleasing industrial design, customizable fly-by-wire aperture ring, manual focus clutch with a depth of field scale and real hard stops, yay, emphasis on keeping size and weight down, internal focusing using a hybrid linear stepping motor, and of course, a leaf shutter, ideal for flash photography. A use case, I confess, that is daylight flash photography, that I did not test with the 90V, but did test with the older XCD 93.2, which was in fact the lens I used for the very first image in the montage, shot on a 50 megapixel X1D Mark II with Broncolor flash. The rest of the montage was shot on the 90V, mounted on the X2D, although I do intend to go out on the streets with the 90V and our ProPhoto A2 eventually. But let's hold that thought for another time, other than to say a leaf shutter lens with a sensor with this kind of readout speed, which is to say slow, can make sense, even if one doesn't use it for flash. It's the only way to control rolling shutter artifacts, although whether or not this matters to you depends, of course, on what and how you shoot. Which is not an uninteresting topic, because if rolling shutter artifacts were not important to most Hassi X and V series camera shooters, Hasselblad could make a new barrel lens line that is without the leaf shutter, even smaller, lighter, and less expensive. That's just a thought. In the end, for me, the 90V is about resolution, industrial design, size, weight, handling, and to my surprise, autofocus, distortion, vignetting, and color. Autofocus, because it is now fit for purpose for one of my primary use cases, urban portrait. That is, after the recent firmware update, which added face detection. It works quite well, though still no continuous autofocus or AF. Already fit for purpose, but now more important for urban landscape because my eyes are not what they once used to be, and manual focusing has become more difficult. Distortion, because the absence of it is critical to urban landscape, and the 90V does the business, a combination of the lens itself and Hasselblad's focus to automatic software correction, although the 90V's distortion was all but non-existent to my eye in the shots I took without it. Vignetting, because I found the 90V's particular light fall-off so distinct and pleasing, wide open for street portrait in particular, that I almost always left it uncorrected. And color, straight out of camera, that convinces me every single time I open up an image on my 32-inch monitor that this particular combination of lens and camera is more pleasing than my own eyes and every other camera lens combination I've ever used at seeing what is good and beautiful in the world. Of course, it doesn't help that I actually see two different color temperatures in each eye. And besides, I'm a black and white kind of guy anyway. But this is why I included color images in the montage. The 90V's colors, like all XCD lenses on Hasselblad X and V systems, are different. Hasselblad camera colors are different. And I am mesmerized by that rendering. 16-bit color depth and how Hasselblad chooses to process the imagery coming off of their sensors, they matter to me. Add the X2D's 102 megapixels into the mix, and I have no problem cropping the crap out of an image taken with the 90V to give me the full-frame field of view of 150 millimeters or more. Now, if only I could find a copy of Hasselblad's XCD 91F4, the full-frame field of view and shallowest depth of field equivalent of a 17.3.2, or when and if Hasselblad releases a V equivalent, this would be a fabulous two-lens kit to bracket our Leica Q3. Q3 for fast close-in work, classic street work, the interchangeable lens X2D for leisurely and deliberate urban landscape or portrait work whenever I needed to go significantly wider or longer, which leads me indirectly to the 90V's competition, so let's go there now. The most obvious competitors to the 90V begin with Hasselblad's own 93.2, which I mentioned a moment ago, but then continue on, most especially to Fujifilm's also digital medium coverage, Fujinon GF110F2 RLM. What WR, and the 80mm 1.7 RWR. So let's start with a $3,200 XCD 93.2. Beyond a more pleasing feel in hand and a customizable aperture ring, Hasselblad has designed the 90V to be smaller, faster, lighter, and both quieter and faster to autofocus than the earlier 93.2. In this, they have succeeded. The 90V is quieter and faster to autofocus than the 93.2, and it is 2/3 of a stop faster at maximum aperture. But when it comes to size and weight, there's not much in it, just 7% and 11% better, respectively. Clearly, Hasselblad also has an objective, just like almost every other manufacturer, to increase margins to offset the collapse of unit volumes across the industry and an increasingly globally uncertain economy. In this, they have likely succeeded as well. The 90V is fully 35% more expensive than the XCD 93.2, even as it has managed to use a simpler optical design with fewer elements, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I didn't have the two lenses side by side on the same camera body, so I can't tell you how they compare from direct experience in the real world, other than that I recall thinking the 93.2 was an outstanding lens, if slow. But it's when one looks at Hasselblad's own MTF charts that it seems Hasselblad's objectives included finding the right balance across all of these things, including where to tweak image quality. Perusing both lenses' MTF charts, it appears the 93.2, even when the 90V has a couple of exotic elements that the 3.2 does not, may be marginally superior to the 90V wide open and stop down, although it is a bit of apples to oranges given the difference in maximum aperture and mid-aperture specifications, where the figures are at 5.6 rather than f8 as they are on the 93.2. Whether it turns out that the 3.2 is marginally superior to the 92.5V or not, I see this as a missed opportunity to raise the image quality bar straight up, but oh well, with this said, I still prefer the 90V in the real world to the 93.2, save for the price. Let's move on to Fujifilm. I've shot with the 110 on the original GFX 100 and the 80 on the GFX 100S, and they are outstanding. Far less expensive than the 90V too, the 110 about half the price of the 90V, the 80 less than half. And that's for new copies of each lens. Used, the difference is, of course, larger. But the Fujinon lenses are not only less satisfying in hand than the 90V, they are also much bigger and heavier. 30 and 44% respectively when comparing the GF80 1.7 to the 92.5, 65% and 83% respectively when comparing the GF 110 to the 90V. Doesn't mean much to a studio photographer, but these are significant differences on the street, in the great outdoors, and when traveling. What about comparing the 90V to full-frame lenses? Should we go there? Let's do, because for some of us, the answer is definitely yes. The thing of it is, the image quality gap between full-frame and medium format digital is much smaller than it was between 35mm and medium format film back in the day. Now, I've covered this many times before, but it all comes down to this. The difference in surface areas between the two formats is much smaller in the digital era. And with the digital revolution, the resolution gap has narrowed significantly. But I'm going to start with what surprised me the most. The 90V on the X2D, even as I tried to account for the X2D's megapixel advantage over our 61 megapixel Sony a7R5 and Leica M11 and our 47.5 megapixel Leica SL2. Well, at near minimum focusing distance and equalized for both object size and depth of field, and again with a concerted effort to take into account differences in sensor resolution, something I'm generally pretty good at, the 90V smoked everything I had anywhere near equivalent fast apertures. Sigma's 85 1.4 DGDN Voigtlander's Apo Scopar 90mm f2.8 on my M11, and this speaks volumes about my respect for it, Sony's FE 24-70 2.8 G Master 2 zoom. Although one might have expected this to be the case because the 90V is so much more expensive and it is a Hasselblad lens, I expected it to be much closer. Then again, those of you who know me know that I do these near minimum focusing distance tests under protest, you could say, because they are repeatable rather than truly representative of a lens's image quality in the real world at real world distances. Only macro lenses are optimized for close-up work, and lens designers often make that close infinity distance trade-off. The only short telephoto I've ever had in hand that I know is better than this 90V in the real world is Leica's full-frame Apo Summicron SL90 f2. Note that while Hasselblad and Leica set the standard for detail resolution at 40 line pairs per millimeter, the other companies only go as far as 30. Only Leica shows infinity and close focus distance performance. Note that in this case, it's at 1 meter, approximately where I am. But I don't own one. I didn't have one available to me for head-to-head testing. A more apples-to-apples comparison would have been the Apo Summicron SL75, but I didn't have that either. Although, the Apo 75 is not quite at the level of the Apo 90 for image quality. Of course, then there's this. The L-Mount Alliance doesn't have a 102 megapixel camera to take advantage of the Apo 90's superiority to begin with, never mind a 61 megapixel camera, nor an autofocus system for their current high-resolution camera bodies fully worthy of it. For the moment, anyway, let's both hold that thought for another quarter or two. I don't know anything you don't. But even if it did, the Apo Summicron SL90 is 25% more expensive than the 90V and just over 30% heavier. Again, these make a difference. All of which leaves us where, precisely? Here, actually. The key to the 90V, the same key to the Hasselblad XCD system, is in the end to evaluate it for what it is rather than what it is not. I think that this 90V paired with the X2D is an excellent optic, ideal for street portrait and urban landscape, which are more deliberate use cases. This combination simply will be, for those of us sufficiently well-heeled and so inclined, the smallest, lightest, highest resolution, most hand-holdable, most compelling medium format camera out there. Again, for those with use cases which align well with the strengths and weaknesses of those Hasselblad systems. I think the 90V is the best of the V lenses so far, optically superior to the more economically priced P series, their 28 and 45 f4s, as well, with autofocus speed and silence which truly do warrant a camera body autofocus system worthy of it. Is the 90V great for studio work too? Sure it is. Think product, food, fashion. Although the entire X lineup is clearly designed for handheld shooting, and a leaf shutter lens is not as necessary in the studio, one could argue, and I'd quite likely agree, as it is out in the field when trying to overpower the sun. Put differently, I think it fair to assert that where one wants an autofocusing short telephoto capable of the highest resolution image capture without pixel shifting, most especially when freed from a tripod and or untethered from a computer, coupled with an autofocusing camera body offering the highest resolution out there with the very best color science in my book. Superb IBIS, excellent EVF, a big, bright, robust, tilty rear screen. Autofocus now fit for purpose when that purpose is to capture frames of nuance, detail, and whimsy, even in low light out in the real world, rather than motion or serendipity. Interchangeable lenses rather than a single integrated prime lens. And industrial design, build quality, and best in the business menu system, all in service of giving one the shortest distance between intent and execution in the smallest, most tactilely satisfying package with all of the things I've just mentioned, Hasselblad now, finally, offers a kit without peer, including anything from Fujifilm's GFX line, Fujifilm's far superior autofocus performance, broader lens lineup, and optional tiltable EVF, oh baby, notwithstanding. Even if I wish, 1, Hasselblad, please significantly improve the camera's autofocus performance with far greater alacrity than you have to date to match the 90V's autofocus performance. How many times have I now said that in this video, let alone all of the others? 2, and now we're really into niggles, I wish the lens hood seating were more forgiving. That is to say, more easily attached to and detached from the lens. And 3, I wish the hard stop, oh baby, on the 90V when the manual focus clutch is engaged, aligned perfectly with the depth of field scale at infinity, say at room temperature, call it 68 degrees Fahrenheit, 20 degrees Celsius, a perfectly irrelevant request for performance purposes, but a detail which users of manual focus lenses would expect. Specific consideration of and engineering for the expansion and contraction characteristics of the lens barrel materials across a wide temperature range, notwithstanding. Yet, even if my wish list were magically executed tomorrow, it would still be the case that medium format systems do compete with full frame systems, which, because they are smaller, lighter, generally less expensive, operationally faster, functionally richer, more versatile by virtue of broader and deeper lens ecosystems, and closer than ever in image quality, with the momentum being in that sensor format, blunt the appeal of even the very best digital medium format cameras for most of us. But from my personal perspective, all of this misses the most important point of this video, which for me, your mileage may vary and that's fine. To return to the beginning of this video is the epiphany that when I stopped trying to make the 90V and the X2D something other than what they are, when, quite independently of that, I stopped hunting for images and instead just concentrated on being, this particular Hasselblad experience inspired me to redefine the very concept of a moment and gave me one of my most important captures of all time. I began to recognize that a moment need not necessarily be decisive or instant, generally understood to mean, although Cartier-Bresson himself took exception to this formulation, a fraction of a second when light, shadow, shape, motion, geometry, juxtaposition, and serendipity come together in the external world and are captured in a single frame. A moment, it struck me, can also be the experience of one's internal reality, measured in minutes, hours, days, perhaps decisive in a broader context, such as an event in one's own life. And the best photographic tool to capture that kind of moment does not necessarily require or lend itself to the usual formulaic assessments we all make about our gear at one point or another. Think the last few minutes of Blue Hour, late one afternoon at water's edge, when you are at one with the world, when all of the greed, brutality, cruelty, hypocrisy, ignorance, incompetence, narcissism of our time melt away and retreat like the ocean itself. The sounds, smells, and rhythms of the sea cleansing your soul, leaving you only with a profound appreciation for what you are in the middle of experiencing. Simplicity, joy, flow, a profound sense of the rapture of being alive. Love. Or, to draw this to a close, A moment lasting 10 or 20 minutes on a station platform, your mind a complete blank because it needs to be, waiting for a train that will take you to see a parent. Were you to think about it then, who you knew every single day of your life without being told, loved you without condition, a parent from whom you'd inherited traits, some wonderful, some not, which in either case helped make you who you are. A parent now slipping away from this mortal coil in what may be a matter of hours. Is it part of the same reconceptualized, redefined longer moment when, without thinking, without feeling, without consciously seeing, you instinctively switch on a camera? And then, was it 5 minutes later, 10? It is up to your eye, a single frame captured, before the train arrives and the journey begins in earnest. The thing of it is, days later, after you've uploaded that card with many other images on it, that particular image comes up on your screen. And it hits you like a ton of bricks. You see an extraordinary moment, just not the way we street photographers tend to think about it. It is a moment that had clearly unfolded over the course of that wait for the train in an unusually dense, enveloping, isolating, and lonely fog. Just one person other than yourself in it. An external counterpoint, a synchronicity, perfect really, to a dawning acceptance within of extraordinary but inevitable loss. A process so far beyond the notion of a fraction of a second that I have no words for it. Other than to tell you that, of course, none of this was hypothetical, that this frame is suddenly one of my favorites of all time, forever burning into my brain and heart what that time on the platform was all about, because I didn't realize it until much later, and that it was taken with the 90V and the X2D I'd chosen, instinctively, for no particular reason of which I'm aware, to take with me that morning. This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 6 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, join the conversation in the comments section below because this is an exceptional audience. If you'd like help with a portfolio review, gear selection, finding or honing your artistic voice, sign up for a one-on-one mentoring video called via Zoom at 3bmep.com/booking. Finally, please consider supporting our work by using the no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, sending us coffee money via PayPal, or most especially, joining us on Patreon, links down below as well. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.